The grocery store was alive with the rhythm of an ordinary afternoon. The squeak of cart wheels, the crinkle of produce bags, the murmur of small-town chatter. Everything seemed perfectly routine. A mother guided her toddler past the cereal aisle. A teenager debated between two brands of chips. An elderly man examined the price of milk. On the surface, it was just another day in a quiet Ohio neighborhood. But what none of them knew was that the air would soon grow heavy, and this simple grocery trip would turn into something unforgettable. Something people would still be talking about weeks later. Near the produce section, a young man in a blue hoodie moved calmly through the aisles, his basket half full, his attention divided between his phone and the oranges in front of him. His name was Daryl. To anyone watching, he was just another customer. But in a matter of seconds, every eye in the store would lock on him. Not far away, an elderly woman adjusted her glasses, her hands fidgeting over a bag of apples. She looked harmless enough, her silver hair pinned neatly, her cardigan buttoned tight. Yet, beneath that quiet exterior, there was something simmering. And then, it happened. Her eyes narrowed. Her voice cut the air like a knife. "You people don't belong here." The words echoed louder than the store's hum, louder than the chatter, louder than the world outside. Time seemed to stop. A bag of chips slipped from someone's hand and hit the floor. A young mother gripped her child's hand tighter. And Daryl, frozen in place, lifted his gaze to meet hers. Her voice rose again, sharper now, deliberate. "Why don't you go back to Africa?" The room went silent. Every sound, the humming refrigerators, the beeping registers, fell into an unbearable stillness. Everyone waited for Daryl's next move. Would he shout back, walk away, or do something no one expected? What he said next would not only silence the room, it would change everyone in it. Stay with me, because what unfolds here isn't just about one confrontation. It's about history, dignity, and the power of truth. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud no one could escape. Every shopper in the aisle seemed frozen, their gazes flicking nervously between the elderly woman and Daryl. The weight of her accusation, her demand that he didn't belong, pressed down on the room until even the sound of someone shifting their cartwheels felt intrusive. Daryl's first instinct was disbelief. His brow furrowed, fingers tightening around the handle of his basket. He could feel every eye on him, strangers silently waiting to see what he would do. Would he raise his voice? Would he snap back with anger? That's what many expected. That's what the tension begged for. But instead, Daryl inhaled deeply. One slow, steady breath. He didn't meet her with fire. He met her with stillness. His calm was unexpected, unsettling even, because silence in the face of hate can feel louder than rage. The woman clutched her apples tighter, her chin lifting with defiance, as if daring him to answer. Around them, a young store employee paused mid-stack of bananas, his hand trembling slightly as he weighed whether to step in. A cashier leaned over her counter, watching closely. Shoppers who had tried to pretend they didn't hear now found themselves unable to look away. This was no longer a routine grocery trip. It was a stage, and everyone in that store was an audience. Daryl shifted his basket slowly to his other hand, standing taller, his presence suddenly filling the space in a way that made even the woman falter. He opened his mouth, not to lash out, but to speak with precision. "Ma'am," he began, voice steady. "Do you even realize what you just said?" The crowd held its breath. The showdown had only just begun. Don't look away now, because Daryl's answer wasn't just for her. It was for everyone. The woman didn't flinch. Her lips pursed tighter, her voice sharper than before. "I said what I said. This is my country. People like you don't belong here." A ripple moved through the onlookers, an audible gasp from a woman near the bread aisle, the nervous cough of a man pretending to check his phone. The store's energy was shifting, pulling everyone into the moment whether they wanted it or not. Daryl didn't rush to answer. He let her words linger, heavy in the air, forcing the silence to stretch just long enough to make everyone feel the weight of them. Then slowly he nodded. "All right," he said softly, his calmness unsettling in its strength. Since you brought it up, let's talk about belonging. He set his basket down with deliberate care, as if anchoring himself. His gaze locked on hers, not with anger, but with something stronger. A steady, unshakable resolve. My great-great-grandfather was born in Mississippi, he began, his voice low but carrying, every word sharp enough to cut through the tension. He was a sharecropper, breaking his back on land he didn't own, trying to build a life in a country that never gave him one. The woman blinked, her grip on the apples faltering. The shoppers leaned in without moving, caught in the gravity of his words. And his father? Darryl continued, his tone heavier now. He was a slave, kidnapped, beaten, sold. His blood helped build the very soil you're standing on. The room was silent, but not empty. It was full of history, pain, and truth. And this was only the beginning. What Darryl revealed next would shake the store even deeper. Darryl's voice didn't waver. If anything, it grew stronger, carrying across the produce aisle until even those at the far end of the store could hear. My grandfather fought in World War II, he said, pausing long enough for the weight of it to land. He wore the uniform of this country, risked his life on foreign soil so the flag could keep flying back home. He shook his head slightly, his eyes locked on the elderly woman's. And when he came back, he couldn't even sit at the same counters, couldn't drink from the same fountains. Fought for freedom abroad but was denied it right here. The woman's jaw clenched, but she didn't speak. A man near the dairy section lowered his phone, no longer pretending to scroll. A young mother whispered to her child, then held her close, as if she too felt the sting of history pressing against the moment. And my parents, Darryl continued, his tone softening but no less powerful. They fought in their own way. My mother, she's a teacher, spent her life shaping kids, no matter their color, no matter their name. My father, he's a mechanic, the kind of man who would pull over in the rain to fix a stranger's car, even if that stranger was you. The hush in the store was thick now, almost reverent. Even the hum of the refrigerators seemed quieter, as though the room itself was listening. So when you tell me I don't belong here, Darryl said finally, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade, you're not just dismissing me, you're dismissing every sacrifice my family made to keep this country alive. His words didn't just hang in the air, they landed like stones. But what came next would turn silence into a spark. The elderly woman's face flushed, her hands trembling as she clutched the apples tighter. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, her defiance cracked just slightly. Darryl didn't press with anger. Instead, he let the silence linger before speaking again. This time not just to her, but to everyone who was listening. I could have walked away, he said, his voice steady, echoing across the crowded aisle. But what good would that do? Ignorance doesn't go away in silence. It has to be faced, named, and challenged, because if we don't, it just grows. A man in a baseball cap near the potatoes lowered his cart and nodded quietly. A cashier leaned further over her counter, eyes wide with admiration. Darryl's gaze returned to the woman, softer now, but no less piercing. You tell me to go back. But where exactly should I go? My family has been here for generations. They paid with sweat, with blood, with dignity denied, so that I could stand here today. I am not a visitor. I am not a guest. I am America too. The elderly woman shifted uncomfortably, as if his words had stripped away the armor she'd worn for years. Around them, the murmurs began. Small at first, then louder, like a tide rising. People weren't just watching anymore. They were choosing sides. Darryl glanced briefly at the gathering crowd, then back at her. It's not about what you meant, he said gently. It's about what you said. Words matter. They can wound or they can heal. And right now, everyone here has seen the difference. And just when the tension reached its peak, the crowd broke its silence. For a moment, the air was still, as though the store itself didn't know how to breathe. Then, from the back of the crowd, a voice broke through. He's right, said a man in a worn baseball cap, stepping forward. His voice cracked, but the courage in it was unmistakable. "We've got to be better than this." The words landed like a spark. A woman near the frozen foods aisle lifted her chin, her eyes misty. "My dad fought in that same war," she said softly. "He always told me the only color that mattered was the red in the flag." The murmurs grew louder now, no longer whispers of discomfort, but voices rising in agreement. A young cashier at her station called out, "I've never seen anyone handle something like that with so much grace. Thank you." The elderly woman's eyes darted nervously from face to face, searching for someone to defend her, but no one came. The crowd had shifted, their silence transformed into solidarity. Daryl stood tall, calm in the storm he had just redirected. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't cursed, yet the strength in his restraint spoke louder than any raised voice ever could. The elderly woman's lips parted as if to answer, but her words stumbled, caught in her throat. Her fire dimmed, replaced by something far more human, uncertainty. Then, slowly, from the deli counter, came the sound of clapping. Hesitant at first, but then joined by another, and another, until the produce aisle was filled with applause. And here's where you lean in, because what Daryl said next wasn't just to her. It was to everyone watching this story right now. Daryl let the clapping die down, then lifted his hand gently, his voice rising above the echoes. "Listen," he said, turning his gaze from the woman to the entire store. "This isn't about one person, it's about all of us." The room hushed instantly. Every face, young and old, weary and wide-eyed, was fixed on him. "We can't pretend words don't matter," he continued, "because they do. They can divide a room, or they can build a bridge. They can tear someone down, or lift them up. And today, we all saw how much damage they can cause." His eyes swept over the crowd. A teenager clutched her shopping basket tighter. An older man near the milk case nodded with quiet conviction. Even the employees, frozen in their routines, leaned in to listen. "But here's the truth," Daryl went on, his voice steady but urgent. "It doesn't have to end in hate. Ignorance only wins if we stay quiet. Dignity only survives if we defend it. And sometimes the most powerful way to fight back is to stay calm, stand tall, and speak truth." The elderly woman lowered her gaze now, her knuckles white around her cart handle. She didn't leave, but the defiance in her posture had faded into something smaller, something less sure. Daryl bent to pick up his basket again, his tone softening. "We can all be better than this. For ourselves, for our kids, for the world they'll grow up in." The words didn't just reach the crowd. They reached through the screen, echoing to every person watching this story unfold. And if you believe in moments like this, hit that subscribe button right now, because together, we can keep spreading voices that heal instead of hurt. The applause faded into an uneasy quiet, like a wave that had crashed and now lingered in its retreat. The elderly woman stood frozen, her chest rising and falling quickly, her face a patchwork of emotions. Anger, embarrassment, and something deeper, something that looked a lot like shame. She glanced around, but every pair of eyes she met told the same story. No one stood with her. Not anymore. The weight of isolation pressed heavier than any argument Daryl could have made. She gripped her cart tighter, her voice barely audible as she muttered, "I didn't mean," but the sentence withered before it could bloom. Even she seemed to realize that an excuse would only fall flat. Daryl didn't push her. He simply looked at her, his expression calm but resolute. "It's not about what you meant," he said gently. "It's about what you said. And now you know the difference." Her lips quivered, her eyes wet, and then, with a shaky turn of her cart, she began to wheel it toward the exit. The crowd parted like water, clearing a path for her without a word. The sound of her cart's squeaky wheel echoed through the aisle until it disappeared beyond the automatic doors. The store was still. Shoppers exhaled breaths they didn't realize they had been holding. A woman placed her hand on Daryl's shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daryl offered a faint smile, lifting his basket back into his hand. Sometimes he said softly, almost to himself. It's not about winning the argument. It's about speaking the truth. But what happened after Daryl left the store would prove this moment wasn't just an ending. It was the start of something greater. That evening, Daryl sat at the kitchen table, the faint clink of silverware in the sink behind him. The glow of the setting sun cast long shadows across the room, painting the walls in warm orange light. His father, a man of few words with calloused hands from years under car hoods, sat across from him, listening quietly as Daryl recounted the day. Daryl's voice carried the weight of exhaustion, but also something deeper, reflection. He told his father about the woman, the silence, the crowd, the applause. When he finished, the room was quiet, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between them. Finally, his father spoke, his tone low but firm. You did the right thing, son. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who was watching. People like her, they don't change overnight. But today you planted a seed. And sometimes planting a seed is all you can do. Let it grow. The words sank into Daryl's heart, steadying him. He realized that his choice to stand calm instead of angry wasn't weakness. It was strength. A different kind of power. The kind that didn't just silence hate for a moment, but challenged it for a lifetime. Daryl nodded slowly, his father's wisdom settling over him like a blanket. I just hope, he said quietly, that seed takes root. His father gave a small smile. It will. You'll see. Truth always finds a way to grow. And across town, in a quiet dining room, that very seed was already beginning to stir. Across town, the elderly woman sat at her dining table, her dinner plate untouched. The quiet tick of a clock filled the room. But louder than the ticking were Daryl's words, echoing, replaying, piercing through the walls she had built around her beliefs. She thought of her grandchildren. She thought of the world they would inherit. For the first time in years, doubt crept in, not weakness, but the beginning of reflection. In the days that followed, whispers of what happened at the grocery store spread through the neighborhood. People talked about Daryl's calm, his dignity, his refusal to answer hate with hate. Some said it inspired them. Others admitted it made them think about the words they had ignored in their own lives. The story rippled outward, far beyond the store's four walls. Daryl never bragged about it. He didn't need to. Strangers approached him with gratitude, sharing their own stories of prejudice and resilience. He realized then that his stand wasn't just a moment. It was a movement, small but powerful, carried on by every person who witnessed it. And the elderly woman? She wasn't transformed overnight, but seeds had been planted. Seeds of humility, seeds of understanding, seeds that might one day grow into apology. Moments like these remind us, standing tall doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it means speaking with grace, with conviction, and letting the truth carry its own weight. To everyone watching, remember your words matter. They can wound or they can heal. They can divide or they can unite. If the story touched you, don't just hold it, share it. Click like, hit subscribe, and pass it on. Because together, we can turn ordinary moments into extraordinary change.